Yeah, so this is a video. I'm basically making an end grain cutting board and I've got it sped up to 500 speed. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Um, yeah, so I basically am, I've got some walnut, it's the dark wood. I've got some maple, is the light wood. And there's a reddish wood that I use that's some mahogany. And basically what I'm doing at this point is I'm not really measuring it out. I'm just kind of cutting random strips. I've got all those four boards cut to the same rough length. And then on my table saw, I'm just kind of playing around with the fence and doing different widths of cut. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you want to do a more specific pattern, then you could measure it all out and do that like that. But for this one, I just am kind of playing around. I got some fat pieces, I got some thin pieces. So I'm cutting those up. And then once I have a bunch of them cut, I start to lay them out, lay the pieces kind of side by side. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to come up with a piece that's going to be 13 inches wide, or not wider than 13 inches. And the reason for that is because I have a 13-inch planer, and so I'm going to want to glue these up and then feed them through the planer. And so I'm just kind of playing around and being like, oh, that's not yet 13 inches, so let's put a fatter piece. That's more than 13 inches, let's put a thinner piece. And then I've kind of got what I'm going to use here. So then I come over to glue up. Um, there's a clamp. Lay all the pieces up on their ends. Put some glue. You can see I've got some Titebond 3 there in the corner, but I actually use the Titebond 2. Titebond 2 is fine for this. The Titebond 3 is a little more expensive, so I don't really use it very often unless it's required. The difference being that Titebond 2 is water resistant and Titebond 3 is waterproof, so I guess you could use either, but everybody says that Titebond 2 is good enough for cutting boards, so that's where I'm at. So then I get the glue on here and I start to lay these pieces down, and then I realize that I'm going to clamp them using those clamps, but then I also want some cawls in place to kind of keep them from wiggling up or down. So then in my genius of forethought, I start to do this while the glue is, while they're all in the clamp drying, right? So I think I want like about 6 cawls, 3 for the top and 3 for the bottom. That's basically going to go in between those clamps. And so I start to do that, and then I realize, let's make them right. And so I'm trimming off all the excess tape around the edges of the cawls. And so I do that here. And again, I think I measured these out. I think these were just kind of some scrap 2x4s that I had milled to have clean edges on. And then I just had cut them out. I don't remember when I cut them out, but I seem to have these pieces kind of readily on hand. So I thought, let's do this. And so then I got basically 6 pieces, or is that 8? There's 8. I don't use all 8, I don't think, but I have these. I've continued to use these, and I've got some of these. And there's me rubbing the bubbles out of the packing tape. The packing tape keeps from getting them basically stuck to the glue as we use them. And so, and then I realize as I'm clamping these, it's lifting them out of the clamps, and I think like, oh, okay, that's fine. This is about the second cutting board I had ever made, and so I'm kind of figuring it out as I go along. This is the first that I made this way. The first cutting board that I made was really over the top complicated, and it didn't come out very well. And so I'm kind of trying to just learn how to make them more consistently. And so you can see as I squeeze those together, the glue is squeezing out, which is why the packing tape is on the cawls, to kind of keep it from sticking there. So I set that aside, let it dry. I've done it twice, basically. I didn't show the other one. But basically, once it's dried, I'm feeding it here through the planer. That's why I want to keep it 13 inches or less at the width. And just kind of feed it through, give it a quarter turn, feed it through, give it a quarter turn. Again, I'm not really like measuring how perfect it has to be. I'm mostly just concerned with getting it smooth and knocking off all the extra glue and getting a smooth kind of piece there. I'm not like, oh, this piece has to be, you know, 0.65 and whatever. just kind of feeding it through until it's smooth. Because the reason is it doesn't really like, I'm not aiming for a final exact dimension. I'm just going to kind of work with what I have. And I kind of feel like that's just the easier way to do things. Feed it through the planers a bunch of times. There we go. Now I'm over to the miter saw to kind of clean up that edge. A little piece out on the edge. It's like right out at the maximum of where it can cut to. And then I thought I was going to cut both sides, but I realized I don't care. I just want one side to be clean. And then the other side, don't look at my underwear. Other side could just be whatever because it's going to get knocked off anyway. So a little bit of sanding here. Just kind of make it smooth. We're not building a church here. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm mostly just making sure that now, when I do the next step, that the pieces hug up together cleanly. Clamp helps to keep it from kind of wiggling around while you're doing this. Yeah, and so you can see what I ended up with that second board is just the mahogany and maple. Where the first one is a mahogany, maple, and walnut, and I just kind of think that that's nice, that it kind of mixes up the pattern a little bit. You can see I'm really trying to get the snipe out from my planer. I'm kind of focusing on those little edges where I got a little bit of snipe. And again, I just want it to be clean when it goes together. Leaf blower for shop cleanup is clutch. Checks out. So now it's back to the table saw, and now these do matter. So now the width that I'm cutting here, these strips, I kind of hug my table up close so I can slide these pieces off. But this is going to determine the actual width of the cutting board, how thick it is, right? From top to bottom, like if you flip it over. This is going to be, I think, 1.5 inches or maybe 1.25 inches. I don't remember what the exact dimension was. Shout out to Jimmy DiResta for the little hands on the push sticks. I love those things. Snaked that idea from him. But yeah, these are all the same thickness, width, height, I guess, is what the actual dimension is. And then when you get close, you get the two hands. And then again for the same. And that's why I cleaned up that one edge, because I want that edge to push up against the fence. And then the bottom edge doesn't matter, because I'm going to end up with some little scrap. And you can see that bottom edge is a little dekoboko, as they say in Japanese. And then the final cut. And then that piece on the left-hand side just is scrap. So now I have all these, and I kind of go over to my workbench here, lay them all out in the groups as I cut them, and then I kind of start to just think about a pattern, like how do I want to do this? So I think like, okay, this is how big the total is going to be, and so I start like putting one of those between each of the walnut pieces and being like, okay. And then just to kind of visualize, because I want a clean edge, I've got this little jig that I can kind of line them up, and I'm thinking really hard right here. What if I rotate every fourth one? How does that look? No, what if I rotate these ones also? How does that look? And again, I'm not trying to create like a perfect checkerboard or anything. I just kind of want it to be a cool pattern. Figure out if these clamps are going to work for the size. They will, so that's good. Let's get them all ready. Move them over. And now at this point, it's a lot more to glue up. So my cauls don't really fit because it's wider than those cauls were. But I don't think I care. Maybe I do. I can't remember exactly. I'm coming back a couple weeks after having made this and narrating it. So I realized they're not going to all fit in the clamps laid flat like this. So So I put them all on the bench there. Then I make a huge mess of glue here. Get out my roller, make a huge mess. That's good. Doot. This is important to get more than you think you need. It's okay to make a mess here, but this is kind of the final glue up, so you really want to make sure that you've got enough in there, and that's so that you don't have cracks, so you don't have any like holes in the final board, that the glue will fill those in. But again, as long as all your pieces were flat, that's why I did that sanding where I kind of clamped it down and sanded them to make sure that these would all be snug. And again, maybe the mahogany maple pieces are a fraction of an inch thicker than the pieces with the walnut in them, but that's fine. For the most part, you just get the cauls in there. I guess that would be optimal if you did plane those pieces down to the same thickness, but I mean, as long as it's not wildly thicker or thinner. I mean, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that final cut on the bandsaw, or on the table saw, sorry, that determines the height. Because it doesn't matter how wide they are, as long as they're all the same height. And then again, this is going to go through the planer again, so it doesn't really super matter, but this is a good chance to get it all clamped and squeeze out all the glue and do all that stuff. So, you know, take your time. There's no rush. The Tupperware with warm water for the roller is clutch. If you let that dry, it's kind of a hassle to clean, but if you keep it in the warm water, it's really easy to clean. So here it is all coming apart. The cauls did stick on there a little bit, but they stuck to the packing tape, which means it's very easy to take them off, which is great. So this is what I've got so far. Come in with the chisel, knock off the glue from the squeeze out from the clamping. Do it on both sides. This doesn't have to be perfect. It's funny because Titebond is actually harder than wood. So what you're doing by doing this step is kind of doing your planer a favor, because as it comes through and it hits all these chunks of glue, it's an opportunity to screw up the blade. So feeding it through. Again, I'm not like going for a perfect dimension, but I did have a streak there. I think one of my blades is already in a bit of a bad way. Lower it down, feed it through, lower it down, feed it through. Keep it going. You can see, yeah, so what I pointed to there, you can't see it, but end grain cutting boards will get destroyed on the final edge. You can see there, those planer blades will really catch that edge on the far side, but that's fine. I don't care. One way you can get around that is you can glue another sacrificial piece of board to the very edge so that they don't, so that the planer blades as they're spinning don't catch that end grain and rip it out towards the end. I didn't really care because I knew I was going to knock another 1/4 inch off the ends, you know, for the final dimensions. Again, I'm not shooting for like, oh my god, it has to be 16 by 18 or whatever. I was just like, it'll just be however big it ends up being, so it's not that big of a deal. So here I'm sanding it down. Again, getting the snipe out is kind of one of the biggest things I'm chasing after here. I haven't really researched how to keep it. I mean, I guess if you feed a sacrificial piece through that's the same height and then you chase it with a sacrificial piece, then the rollers don't have a chance to really introduce snipe. I'm not too fussed at this point. So now onto the router. I need to work on my routing here because I really burn it a little bit. You can see on the edges. This is a tiny trim router that's mounted on my table saw extension. At this point, by the time I'm recording this, or by the time I'm narrating it anyway, I've got a Bosch 1617 that's mounted in that same position, so I had to drill out new holes and get in. I've got a better router basically where that one is, and now that little trim router, that's a little Makita trim router, is just for freehanding. But you can see the burn marks on the edge there, but I just make sure and sand them off. It's not a big deal. So here I'm going through This is interesting. I learned, I think after the fact, I'm not sure if I did it on this one, but you actually don't want to sand it super smooth, because if you go up to like 2000 grit or 3000 grit, then the mineral oil actually doesn't have a chance to soak in as well as if you kind of stop around 220 or 400. So I think on these ones I went up to 6. Yeah, so I did go pretty high on these ones. I think I went up to 1200 or so, which is super nice. It makes it super smooth, but I think that there's a better, like if you stop at like 400 for an end grain cutting board, then it allows the mineral oil to soak in. And so now here I get my daughter, and I get her. I know that she likes to, she also watches videos like these online and loves the super satisfying part of the final reveal. So I get
you can touch it and see how smooth it is. But then when you rub the mineral oil in, it's like the most coolest part. You ready?
Whoa! Yes.
Grab that.
You like
Rub it in. Yeah.
I love this part. Every time it's gonna look much. Oh yeah. I'm putting up. Wow.
Get over here too.
That looks amazing.
Looks super nice, right?
Yeah.
Flip it over. Get the sides. Get this part here.
Oh yeah.
Some here too.
Yeah.
There's a little bit here. Okay. And then take it like a, kind of like a U shape, to the whole top, like the front and the back and the little curve, like this little angle. Do that for me. Got it. I think you're good, big girl. Let me see. How's it look?
It looks amazing.
Maybe we'll make one of these for Josh and Shoko. Kona and Leo. Nice. Good job. You want to wipe your hands off?
I didn't get any.
Hmm? No, just do your hands like this. Like if you try to grab the doorknob on the way inside, it's gonna be super slippery. And then when you get inside, wash your hands with soap and water, okay?
What?
If you drink this, like if you took a teaspoon of this and you drank it, you'd have to do poops all day long.
All day long.
Yeah, so again, I lost the footage at the end. This is kind of the final shot. But yeah, you can bang one of these out in a day or two. Really, the longest part is waiting for the glue to dry. It's a pretty simple process. Thanks for watching. See you next time.